Listen up before we get started on the podcast today. The platform VXP, built for beer distributors by beer distributors, is hiring. If you are listening to the podcast, you are obsessed with the industry. If you're obsessed with helping beer distributors run sharper, smarter, and more profitable teams, this job might be for you. And Mikey, we are excited to welcome a new team member into the team. Tell people a little bit about the role.
Yeah, here at VXP, our customer success lead is going to help make sure that every client is successful throughout the entire setup process and beyond. So helping manage our clients day to day, looking over data analysis, guiding, helping build objectives and incentives, and also training, being on site with reps and virtually with reps, and helping with all things kickoff.
You'll also be involved in working with Ross in the implementation side and getting the clients ready to go. Ross, we're looking for somebody who loves data as well too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Be able to operate software. I mean, if you've operated our software, that's a good start. And having that left and right side brain, being able to be analytical, but also be personable and be able to adapt to what customers are telling you what they want, and also being able to drive them towards what they really need. So we figured putting it out here would be a good place that we might find somebody that fits the profile.
For those of you listening and wondering a little bit more about VXP, we're a small team with big impact. And if you're looking to serve and work with some of the biggest and the best distributors in the country, this might be a good fit for you. We're looking for somebody who's obsessed. We're looking for somebody who's spent time in the industry. We're looking for somebody who's either been in sales, run sales, been an SEC, a sales analyst, and basically live the daily grind and can walk the walk and talk the talk of the beer industry. This may be one of the hardest and most rewarding roles. And if that excites you, please apply. Ways you can apply. You can go to our website, vxptech.com. That's vxptech.com/hiring. You will see the details of the job listing there. At the very bottom, you can see how to apply. We want to see how you're built for beer by beer. And send us anything that captures your mindset, a story, a sales deck, a battle-tested spreadsheet, a Loom video, or whatever it is. We care less about format and more about flavor. We want to see how you think and how you react and how you interact with whatever you want to share with us. And we want you to email that to info@vxptech.com with the subject line, I'm in built for beer. So if that fancies you, if you're excited, you got the rules of the road, you know how to do it, and we're looking forward to talking to you soon. This is the Tapped In Podcast, the podcast for beverage distributors that want to empower their sales team to drive business results. Well, listen up and welcome back to another episode of the Tapped In Sales Podcast, your podcast for beer distributors by beer distributors. We have lost Moneyball Ross for the week. He thinks because it's birthday week, he doesn't have to show up for the podcast anymore. So happy birthday to Ross. Happy birthday to Ross. Blah, 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 all that bullshit. We miss you, Ross. We know we'll be back. We have Data Mike, and we also have the Silver Fox George here with us this week to talk about a couple fun things. But it's exciting. George figured out how to do look at us. Like, we do this every week. George figured out how to do the background. I could give two shits what my background looks like. So, we're just going to do it as it is. But George is teaching us how to run the pod early on today. So why would we be surprised by that, Mike? One bit.
No, it looks good. It looks very sophisticated sitting in the library. Many books.
Many books.
Love it. Love it. Well, today topic, George, this is kind of something that you've been passionate about. Is this, and I'm going to call it people, process, technology. Are you solving the wrong problem? And this is something you've been in, technology sales, implementing technology for a long time. And we love technology around here on the Tapped In Sales Podcast. We also, Mike, from our time at running our distributor, we also love technology just from implementing it and being a distributor. But sometimes things are just people problems, and sometimes things are just process problems. And you don't necessarily need a piece of technology to solve those things, or maybe you think a piece of technology will solve them, but you still got to do the work and you still got to do something with it. So, George, that's what we're going to kind of talk about from your expertise and world. So Do you want to frame it for us and kind of get us started down your path, my man, of where this insight comes from? Because you've developed this insight over a long history of working in the industry and working with people and technology.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you think about it with as you kind of characterize it, you've got the people, the process, the technology, right? So you've got that three-legged stool, and to overuse an analogy, but I think it's a pretty solid analogy that people can relate to, because if any one of those is off, the stool, is leaning, and as you think through those pieces, right? I think we've got our technology, we've got our internal processes, and then we've got our people. And if any one of those things are not in alignment, right, we're not going to get the results that we are striving to attain. And I like to characterize it into, the old scenario that says everybody listens to the same radio station, WIIFM, and essentially just that's what's in it for me. And that perspective, I think everybody comes to, in whatever situation, whether it's personal or professional, there's always that element of what am I going to get out of it, right? Why should I care?
And what's in, like you said, what's in it for me? What's most important to me? What am I going to win out of this any way, shape, or form? Mikey, let's give people a good example in your world of where some things are not a technology problem and there is a people problem and a process problem, and something that I know that falls on your lap and in your wheelhouse is backdoor audits. And when we mean backdoor audits, we're talking about when that out-of-date product or close-to-go product comes back. You can't always fix those things with a piece of technology. You need a process and you need a person to actually do it the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a huge human element that has to go into that, and the ultimate outcome is accountability. And if we don't have a process and the people in place, then we're never going to have the accountability. So if you're talking about, finished product loss coming in the back door, and there really is no process, everything just comes in, I send it back as a rep, right? There's no checks and balances. Then I can send anything back that I want. And there's really no accountability on me. And even if there isn't a total at-risk dollars for finished product loss or any kind of, maybe profit sharing or loss sharing with the reps, it's still that accountability level, right? And to be able to have that process in there and have the person in there to call that out, I mean, we see it all the time. We see night and day differences from, hey, it's freewheel, bring anything back that you want. You tried it, it didn't work, or it's out of code. Hey, you built this massive display and it was awesome. And it was great for photos, but half of it's coming back. We see night and day differences once there's a little bit of accountability on there.
George, when you're thinking about people, process, technology, do you think about it in that order? Is it important to have that order, or does the order not really matter and it's more of a holistic thought process of asking questions to yourself first around all three of them?
Yeah, I think you've got to look at all three of them equally, and as you go through the approach or the initiative, right? Sometimes you're going to have to shift the focus, but all three of those are equally important, right? I think we'd all agree that if any one of those were missing in the equation, we're in trouble. But I think if you think in terms of process or technology, I mean, it's some of that stuff is almost binary, right? It's very black and white. And when you think about people, though, it's just lots of shades of gray, right? And because people are different, no matter what, people are different, and you've got to figure out how to blend across the team that you have, and maybe work with some intricacies of individuals as well.
I always like to try to model some examples out. My favorite people problem that we ran across, Mike, was the one that I created when I tried to take on pricing. It was all a people problem. It wasn't a technology problem, wasn't a process problem. It was my inability to manage pricing effectively.
I remember that.
It was dark days, was it not?
But at least you admit it, right? And we found the problem, coming back to a person problem. But I think a lot of people would go wrong with automatically blaming the process or blaming the technology. as the problem right away when the underlying issue was a people problem.
So it was a person problem that I wanted to make a process problem. And the process was I needed to get Sandy to realize that I was the problem and she was the solution.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was the plan.
Yeah.
Which I eventually did win that game after a month or two of like not getting anything in the back door at a chain. We finally solved that. So let's move over, George, into WIIFM, what's in it for me, and some of the thought process that you have around human behavior and like how people don't change, like how you got to talk to them about what's in it for them and the people and process and technology side of those thoughts.
Yeah, and I think at its core, really, if you think about the WIIFM, what's in it for me, I think there's behavioral psychology and there's motivational psychology, kind of that blended into it. And what I kind of ground that in is think of a family, and siblings, right? You're the same gene pool, the same behavior, or excuse me, they're raised essentially the same way by the same rules, expectations, and boundaries, and they could be very different, right? So when your team shows up, right, they're coming to the table with lots of different life expectations, life experiences. And so while you may have a very clear and thought out plan, you've also got to take a look at like, what is it that motivates individual people, right? Some people are just clearly motivated by different things. And so being cognizant of some of those things, you can really start to hone in on how to get the full, performance and expectation out of people, because really people don't necessarily optimize around actual value. It's really the outcome that they feel, right? You've talked before about, aversion theory and those things as well, right? So it's not always just the hardcore number. It's how I feel, right? Am I avoiding pain? Am I avoiding a loss, right? And everybody's going to address that just a little bit individually. And so really at its core, those are some things that I think you don't want to lose sight of when you're thinking about the people part of the equation.
And when we think about this, like, where do you fall on when a leader is like, hey man, you just got to do your job? Like, is there more things that we need to dig into as leaders? Like ask follow-up questions. Do we need to be more exploratory? Like I think about Brad, Mike, as how Brad would really struggle with the mindset of moving people in and like getting them to opt in and, inspire and enroll versus command and control. I think there's still a lot of challenge in the world and in our industry between seasoned veterans and the new folks, and the newbies in the room are like, just do your job. Like just do in there. I still think that why and what's in it for me are two good and important components to talk about with your staff. And if you're not doing that, you still do have this kind of dichotomy or separation between just do your job. That's what I need you to do. And why and what's in it for me to do the job that way.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what's in it for me is a very real situation, right? And reps don't change just because the company says so. They're going to change when they understand exactly how that change benefits them. And connecting the dots and, working with our VXP clients and being out on the road, and the reps that really get it are the ones that are like, oh, okay, well, hey, if I get these pods or if I shift this mix and increase my profitability on my route, I get X amount of dollars on my paycheck, right? I'm connecting those dots of the why, and once they get that and it clicks, everything changes. And honestly, when reps resist it, it's really not laziness. It's rarely laziness. It's lack of clarity, and they don't see the connection between the effort and the outcome. So, I mean, I guess I'll bounce back to you, George, of like, how do you coach leaders to communicate the what's in it for me without turning every conversation into a carrot dangling exercise, right? Of got to do this. How do you really train those leaders to get that down?
Well, I think it kind of again comes back to, people are going to act on like their self-interests, right? So Some people might be motivated again to, like, I just want to achieve this goal for the sake of achieving a goal, right? They have clear and defined goals, and that's how they measure their success. Others are going to look at it from, I have a financial, right? Purely financially motivated. And so while you can't obviously tailor the plan to everybody, is really just trying to understand what the priorities are that individuals are working with. But also, I think the other part of it that works out very well is people like being part of a team, right? And so even if they might get caught up a little bit in some of their own self-interests, they still want to be a contributing member of that team. And so you've got to kind of look at it as at the individual pieces, but then you've also, at the end of the day, you've got to look at it, with the team. And then once you think of like the physical, like sales team, it's also the, you've got the next level up, which, ultimately is the company as the team, right? So helping them understand how they contribute individually, and what it means for them, but also blowing it, outward and helping them understand, hey, I'm a part of this greater team and I want to be a contributor to it. And what my individual contributions, gain, how that also then feeds into how the company itself, the company achieves their goals and objectives as well.
When you're looking at processes, so one of the things that we hear in our brains a lot is like, our process is slowing us down, or there's too much red tape, is there too much bureaucracy? Have you ever seen a process become a villain, George? Over engineered, too hard, too difficult, or just the wrong thing as well?
Yeah, and it's a great question, because I think there are times when, desperate times bring about desperate measures, and people think, I've got a problem, so I'm going to go and find a process to solve the problem. You don't ever want to just think that, I'm going to buy a piece of technology that has a process built into it, and therefore, if I follow that, it's going to solve everything, right? Again, they all need to be in balance, but technology is not always, or a process is not always the sole answer, right? And what we really will see, as you kind of indicating too, is that you can make that process so prescriptive that it actually paralyzes the team. They're just wondering, well, which step do I need to do next, right? Because it's a 27-step process and it's linear or whatever it might be, right? So you got to give them a framework or a recipe of what success looks like, and then they have to internalize it and individualize it to make that happen in their specific situation.
Yeah. Mikey, do you got any good processes you've seen where they become a villain or become anything to model?
I've seen a lot of processes start out with good intentions, right, and a pretty simple start, but then over time turn into like a 12-step obstacle course, right? You had a clean incentive plan or a clean process to clean this up, and then by the time everybody gets their hands on it and layers in, we have 14 different KPIs or 14 different levels that you have to go through. So yeah, I feel like that's where it really goes wrong, especially my initial comment on like the FPL or any kind of process like that. It's where, when you're trying to gauge the outcome and you're trying to control the outcome, keep it simple for everybody. I mean, I don't know how many times I've said this on previous episodes, but the moment the rep can't explain the process, you have no process, right? If they can't explain the incentive to you, they can't explain the objective or the process. You might as well not have one, because they don't understand it. So keeping it simple, just like our objectives and incentives, is key.
We were working with a client this week around supplier incentives and the quantity of dollars that are showing up being paid to the reps by supplier funding. And when you're listening and talking about this with your team and trying to get down to the bottom, processes don't start as becoming a villain. They're often put together in the world of, we want to do this for this positive reason, or we want to do this because we need to. And over time, they morph. You live long enough, you die a hero, or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. And if you aren't going back through and cleaning up processes or thinking about why, then you can have these things that just get outdated and they have these unintended consequences. So we do need processes. We do want processes, but they can get unintended in a long way. And in this example, the intention here was to try to keep the reps as, income steady as possible through some supplier funding. And now it's turned into where the tail's wagging the dog. And now the owners are like, I'm not getting the results that I'm expecting, and I'm not getting the results that I want. And how do I get back to getting those results? Well, we got to unpeel the onion. We got to look at the process. How did we get there? And I just choose to relinquish some angst for folks around just understand how you got here, that it was well intentioned. And because it's turned bad does not make it bad from the start. If it started out from a well intentioned, it's just wound up with an unintended consequence at the end of the day. So, George, you have seen this a bunch of, we're going to kind of pick on ourselves as a technology vendor, but also just all technology vendors in general, of the technology trap, where you think this might be a magic bullet. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Where do you see tech being a trap, and where can it not solve challenges if you haven't gone through this people and process part right first?
Well, I think the real benefit is when you've got the process, and it creates a kind of a natural workflow that the technology supports that workflow, right? So it's clear, it's concise. It helps me, manage my role, my job. And so when that technology really does kind of follow that flow, it's really enabling. Now, the other part you have to be careful of, though, is that sometimes technology will say, well, this is the process, right? These X number of steps. And then it locks people in there, because we all know that there are always exceptions to the rule. So yes, it needs to support that flow, but it needs to give them some flexibility to be able to respond and react when some other situation doesn't follow that happy path, right?
Yep. 100%. And Mikey, when we're thinking about adding technology in the past, like one of the things that I loved that we did was we got a lot of buy-in from the bottom up a lot of the times. And we did think about how processes would change as part of implementing the technology. Like when we switched RAS vendors, this was all about changing a ton of processes. The technology helped us change the processes, but it was at the end of the day, redeploying work from one person in the team that was the center of power, which was Sandy. She knew everything. Nothing moved without her fingers on it. And then pushed it down throughout the organization. And that was a big thing that we did, and it really worked out well for us. But we had those conversations internally before we made those changes. We had that buy-in.
Yeah, you need the buy-in. You need the support. And once again, you need the why we're making this change to disrupt what we do normally, what the outcome's going to be, for sure.
George, do you have a story? Sorry, Mike, I cut you off there.
No, I mean, it's like just in coming back to like the tech trap thing, and it's super easy to blame the technology or the tool, right? But basically, the tech is just a mirror. It's showing you what's really happening underneath, right? So whether it be VXP or whatever tool that you're using, you're going to instantly see the reality of who's hitting the KPIs, who's coasting, who's ignoring it, who isn't. The technology isn't judging anybody; it's just reporting on it. So when we start to blame the tech or this or that, there was usually an underlying people problem too under there.
George, do you have any good stories where technology was the grease that really made the people and the processes hum? Because it can also be a big winner and really accelerate what you're trying to get done too, and relinquish some backlogs or some dams or some issues in the people and in the process, and really kind of grease the wheels of everything. Have you got any good stories where it's been hey, we broke off the log jam and look how efficient we are now?
Well, I think, I've got a couple, but I think let's kind of focus on, who our audience is too, right? And
yeah,
I've done this a couple of times with mobile apps, right? And specific to salespeople, right? And salespeople, while they like their autonomy, their flexibility, they just need guardrails too, right? And so when they several times what we've done is we've seen scenarios where as long as we give them those guardrails and with that flexibility, like I was referring earlier, like you can't make it so just fixed that you can't, have that autonomy to move and do what you need to do to react and respond. We've seen a lot of success there. And really what it's also doing is that it's that sense of where do I stand, right? Because we're constantly measuring, and they want to know exactly whatever the goals are that have been set, whatever the expectations are for that day. Hey, I need to sell X amount of this, or I need to achieve these specific objectives. Referring back to early in my career, in a mobile app that we put together, but when they saw that and they could constantly be looking at how they have some control over their destiny, right? So they have the flexibility to make decisions on the fly, but they also, as a part of the process, right? The team leader, for example, is an enabler. They're a coach. They're not a babysitter. And because you're able to share that data across the team, now you've got those interactions, you've got those support mechanisms that can enable folks to operate individually against their goals and then operate with a team and get the help that they need when they need it, not after the fact, right? So you can operate, if not in real time, in very near real time.
Yep.
And I feel like there's a different level of engagement when the tech, whatever the tech may be, is there for you to use instead of there and forced on you to use, right? I feel like there's a lot of tech out there, and I'm going back to putting myself in like a sales rep's position and their shoes, and there's a lot of tech that's forced on you to use, that you have to use every day, and then there's like, it doesn't work. I'm pissed off at it because I have to use it, but then when the tech is actually there for your benefit, and you can use it to actually grow your paycheck, and now you're using it on your own. I do feel like there's like a different, feel and different vibe when it comes off like that as well.
I think there's an important dynamic there too. And sometimes you've got to look at this, you always have to look at this holistically, right? You've got to look at it from an organizational perspective and then how it trickles down to the rest of the team. And what I mean by that too is that sometimes as in a role and as I roll out new technology, I might actually be spending a little bit more time, right, doing a task or doing an additional ask of me. But what's really happening is downstream in another part of the organization, we're eliminating an hour of work, right, or minutes of work, whatever it might be. So that trade-off of a few minutes on my part really creates hours on somebody else's part, or an efficiency, right? It could be dollars. And so you can't always just look at it. Again, it is what's in it for me, but you still need to understand how the individual fits into the entire organization and where they contribute, right? Because you don't ever want to lose sight of it. I mean, you see it in professional sports, you see it in just group interactions. Everybody wants to fit in and everybody wants to contribute.
100%. When you're thinking about diagnosing this problem or you find this stuff interesting and you're like, okay, I got a couple things that I could work on here. George, you got any good like cheat sheet or kind of thought processes that a leadership team should kind of go through and talk internally around how do they start to diagnose these things from start to finish? Like model that out for us.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things to think about, right? And I'm really going to focus on kind of the soft side or the warm side for a minute, but people are going to act on self-interest first, right? So knowing that and knowing how they fit into that, you really got to think of how to sometimes coach that person or understand just those little intricacies. That could be very much maybe a family or, like I said, a personal thing, right? they're saving up to get a new car, right, or something like that. And so, what are those things that are really driving them? Because everybody across that team is going to have different priorities, but having a sense of those, I think, really helps. Well, number one, it helps them achieve the results and the organizational results, but it builds also that bond, right, between that individual and the potentially the team leader, or even peer to peer, right? And so, and maybe I don't, as an individual, want to share, whatever it is that's driving me or bothering me or whatever. But naturally, my peer might understand that, and because we are working together, right, now I can say, hey, what's working for you? What's working for you, for me, right? And so you build off of that, because again, everybody has those different priorities. I think the other thing is that when you're looking at this, the value that you tie to it, it needs to be explicit and clear, right? It can't be implied. It's got to be a clear goal. It's got to be clearly attainable, giving them a sense of that, hey, I can achieve this. It's not a walk in the park, but if I do what I need to do, I can achieve those things. And probably last thing I'd say is that when I think in terms of like what's in it for me, it's focused on the outcome, not the technology, right? The technology should be an enabler, but really the process and the technology should be what's driving, supporting me in that role to achieve the outcome that I'm trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Those are all good things. And when you're going through this, like, continue to ask yourself, is this a people problem or a people opportunity? Is it a process problem or a process opportunity? And can we wrap it and have it supported in technology in some way, shape, or form? Or how does the technology either supporting it, or how's the technology getting in the way of it? Because technology can do both. It can. And there are things that you can reposition the technology, reposition the thought process around it to make it better or make it worse. We've seen it both ways across different platforms we use. How some of the email, remember how easy email became, and now it's like you get hundreds of emails a day. It's like a logjam at the same time too. Or the texting was cool when you're with your friends, and then if you're getting emails about work and texts about work, it's not in one central stream anymore. So what was once nice and easy and simple has now become chaotic, and these are just examples that we're throwing out that are easy in the world to see.
But you touched on it though too, is you've got to have the mindset that, hey, I've got a plan, and then I'm going to measure the results, and guess what, I might need to change things up, right? The plan looked perfect, and then once we got into the trenches, it was chaos, right? And and that's also I think the other part is the beauty of process. And I like to use the analogy of like, I've never been in the service, and thank you for those of you that have been. But part of the whole basic training and the reason why they run them through these things over and over and over again is so when the bullets start flying, you're not thinking, it's just natural, right? And so your process needs to be that, again, that framework. But then when they're in the throes of what's happening in the trade, that process is supporting them. It's not like just tying them down, right? It's those guardrails that we talked about, or guidelines.
Well, we also have got a new process in place, which is going to become a people problem related to the new hemp farm bill, or really, I don't know what I would call it, but it's a new federal law banning most intoxicating hemp-derived THC products. And really what it's doing is closing the loophole that was effectively created by the 2018 Farm Bill. And what's interesting about this is it kind of got its butt handed to it. Like, there was an amendment to strike it. It didn't pass. Like, in the Senate, it got its absolute butt kicked. It was 22 votes, which would be, I forget how it's worded because it's worded weird. A yay vote was to keep the amendment, and a nay vote was to strike it. I think that's what it was. So it was not strucken, and it kept going. But it does things like limit to 0.4 milligrams per container. I mean, that's gonna, like, it's low, way lower than what we thought it should be. But I mean, it's kind of a slap in the face for anybody who's a THC vendor who's like, we should have it as 20 or 30 or 40 or 50. Like, come on, guys. Like, you went too far. legislators are serious about this stuff. Like they're going to wind this back in. Ban synthetic cannabinoids as well. I think this is mostly the Delta 8 stuff. And preservation for there is a preservation for non-intoxicating hemp products as well. So I think that's really around CBD, but also some of the stuff for fiber and what you can do with hemp and clothing. So it's really just about this beverage or the flower products or the edible products. Now there is still hope as well. The timeline of this is that it's going to be passed and signed into law in November, that the immediate current status law will stay in effect for the following year, and the new law officially takes effect as is in January 1, 2026. So that's more than a 365-day grace period from today, basically, to January 1, and full enforcement will start December 31, 2026. So we got a year to figure this out. But the hemp crew and any distributor who wants to be involved in this has got to get serious about how are they going to lobby, how are they going to make adjustments to either A, kick it down to the states. It's a state rights issue and it should get booted down to the states and let the states handle it. B, change it federally and get a new law passed, which is no easy task, by the way, to get that done. That's time, money, time, treasure, talent. It takes everything, time, money, and talent to be able to do that. And it's like the hemp folks from the outside looking in, we pay attention to this in the market in terms of what it does for our business, for our clients' businesses, right, Mike? But we're not in the weeds on, advocating for this or legislating. We don't talk to legislators about this or anybody about it other than here on the pod pretty much, or what it does from the business side. It's like they were asleep at the wheel with how bad the butt kicking they got in Washington over this, that there was no fallback, there was no direction, and they just said, no, just keep it as is. And Senate had no interest in doing that, come to find out.
Yeah, it really needs to separate itself from riding on the coattails of the Farm Bill and needs some federal regulation. Maybe this is a good thing. Maybe this is the kick in the butt for that industry to really just get some legislation passed and maybe see where it goes for Delta 9 and THC beverages across the country, whether it's state level or federal level. But I mean, how long could it ride on the Farm Bill, to be honest? I mean, and there's so many states that are it's legal, but there's so many distributors that are like, until we actually get some clarity on this, we are not taking a chance because we hold a federal license, and you can't blame them too. So there's been it's been in the gray for a long time. We need some black and white, and it's time. So maybe it's a good thing. I mean, it's not going to be a good thing for a lot of our clients, but maybe this will be the kick in the butt to kind of get it off on its own.
I lay it at the feet of the suppliers that did not do a good job effectively negotiating for this. There's a lot of distributors that don't have a dog in this hunt, or like, I'll sell it because I can, or because it's smart to, or because my competitor's selling it. But it's not their main line of business, and it drives a lot of profitability on an individual basis, but isn't yet moving a lot of total retail dollars, and isn't yet moving a lot of volume either. So at the end of the day, it's a learning experience for these THC suppliers to learn from this, and hopefully they can come back with some negotiating positions and find some common ground with these legislators over what this actually looks like and how they actually move forward. Because if not, the industry will from the read that I have on this, I'm not sure how the industry doesn't just evaporate come January 1, 2027,
right.
Really.
Which is what the dispensaries want, right? I mean, the dispensaries want this stuff to go away. For sure. And there's probably some major dollars and some lobbyists behind that too that's pushing. So I mean, Delta 9 has a pretty tough competitor when it comes to just actual THC products and the volume that it drives into dispensaries. And we see that volume really decrease when states are legal for Delta 9. There's really no reason to drive to your dispensary and get a drink unless you really smoke it and you really like the other options that they have there. But in states where you can just get an edible or a drink anywhere at your local gas station, that volume decreases. What was the last stat? I think Ian was telling us about the stat where it was like 98% of all beverages THC beverages are outside of dispensaries. That's
Yep.
crazy. That is, I mean, that's a pretty big statistic, especially when you look around the country. So probably some good lobbyist dollars heading against that for sure.
Big marijuana.
Big marijuana, and there's there's a little bit of money in that industry too, I would imagine.
They're money organized. They're longer. They've been around longer. They've worked out some of the kinks, because it's not like that big marijuana, when it was little marijuana, didn't get their butt kicked every now and then at the federal level too. They still haven't gotten a banking law passed. So they're not particularly the most effective network in Washington, D.C. either, but they have been incredibly effective at the states. Getting it done, and the feds have turned turned a blind eye to a large part of their industry too. So, George, you were going to break in here.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think one of the messages I'm taking away from it is that it likely in Washington it wasn't a clear message, right? It wasn't a consistent message. So they're like, hey, if we can't get a clear, consistent message, we're going to set the bar low, right?
Yeah.
In terms of what's available. And so, to your point, is I think the Delta 9 industry is going to have to come forward and say, here's what it should be. There's probably going to have to be some research behind it too, right? There's going to have to be that component. But I think that it's their call to action to come together. I think is get tighter as an industry and get that representation to at least give the message of what it is that they want to provide. I do think, though, that if it is going to be successful, going through the three-tier network is really the way that it should go to market.
It's the most sophisticated, and we're already dealing with this, legal substance and alcohol. It's organized. It's easy. We know if you're a federal agent and it's, federally regulated, where all the products stored, that all the products has been paid for taxes, or that there's tax collections and passed through in some way, shape, or form. You can look at inventory receipts, track the sales. Everything's really clean and black and white, versus, any other network out there, which is just not have the same experience that beverage alcohol distributors have. And George brings up a good point on kind of inside baseball, the way that legislation gets done, the way the sausage gets made, that when you have a hot topic button like this, and you go to legislators with mixed messages, and George is not talking about mixed messages from group A to group B to groups, from inside one group. It's that there's 2 or 3 groups that all have a concern about the same law or same amendment in this example, and they have different perspectives and different vantage points in which they're trying to get done. And oftentimes legislative bodies, they throw their arms up and they say, hey, this is something you all feel like is important to your collective businesses. Get in a room and figure this out. In the meantime, we're going to take action to lower this to the lowest common denominator and put this back in the box that it should have been in, because you guys have been driving the bus or a semi truck through a loophole that we made in 2018 with unintended consequences. So we're going to restrict that loophole down while you knuckleheads figure out how to get on the same page. And if you can get on the same page, come back to us in a year or sometime within the next year, better said, and figure it out. And it present to us what you want it to look like, help us craft the legislation, and we'll see what we can do to get it passed. The risk now is that you put it on a time clock. By not getting on the same page early enough as an industry group, now we're not moving forward. And these federal laws are tough to pass. So I see 2 paths forward. You work like hell to get it kicked to the states, and it gets bounced down, and you just wind up with 50 different versions of a hemp law, which is very similar to alcohol. There's nothing wrong with that. The suppliers will complain and whine and say, well, I can't manage it. Well, there's a lot of other businesses that are big and do just fine managing 50 different regulations, everything from car to alcohol to medicine. So this is not new. And this is something that are bigger businesses are more complex than hemp. You'll be able to figure it out too. Or you got to band together and figure out how to get something done at the federal level, which getting something undone at the federal level like this is probably going to be even harder, would be my guess.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like you're encouraging people to be at the table, not on the menu.
Always have, always will. It's the best way to be. It's the best way to be. I like to eat too, so I want to sit at the table. I don't like to eat. I don't like to get gobbled up. So, boys, good episode. I wanted to touch on that just because that was probably the biggest beverage alcohol news for the week. We will see where this goes and where it winds up. You know, if anybody's got a different opinion, anybody wants to come on and talk about this and say, hey, this is what we tried to get done, and shares a different perspective, would love to hear that, because legislatively in the weeds, political junkies, a little bit from behind the scenes, we don't talk about that a lot, but we're paying attention to a lot of this stuff and talking to clients about it, but we don't get in the weeds much farther than that. So, boys, anything else you guys want to add here?
Heading north, man. I'm excited. See you guys in 5 days, 6 days.
Mikey's going to, what are you doing, Mikey? You're going to deer camp, right?
Heading up to deer camp, man. Go drink some beer, hang out in the woods with the fellas, and I mean, hopefully see a deer. Probably see more bear than deer, but we'll drink some beer. So hey, all will be well.
There you go. There you go. I love it. Well, you guys rock. And if you like what we're doing, you can continue to like, listen, and subscribe. You can also hit us up with an email question or a listener question to info@vxptech.com. That's info@vxptech.com. We will be here again next week. George, Silver Fox, thanks for joining us, my man. Data Mike, have fun on vacation, and you all rock. Cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah.